In this presentation, I will outline Chapter 1 material, which is Globalization Imperative. Marketing products and services around the world, transcending national and political boundaries, is a fascinating phenomenon. The phenomenon, however, is not entirely new. Products have been traded across borders throughout civilization, extending back beyond the Silk Road that once connected east with west, from Xi'an to Rome on land, and recently sea trade route between the Roman Empire and India that existed 2,000 years ago. However, since the end of World War II, the world economy has experienced a spectacular growth rate never witnessed before in human history. Primarily led by large US companies in the 50s and 60s, then by European and Japanese companies in the 1970s and 80s, and most recently by new emerging market firms such as Lenovo, Mittal Steel, Huawei, Hires, and etc. In particular, competition coming recently from the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, which has given the notion of global competition a touch of extra urgency and significance. In the next 10 to 20 years, the greatest commercial opportunities are expected to be found increasingly in big emerging markets, the Chinese economic area, India, South Korea, Mexico, Brazil to ASEAN, including Indonesia. Accordingly, an increasing number of competitors are expected to originate from those emerging economies. In the past 20 years, China's real annual GDP growth rate has averaged 9.5% a year, while India has been 5.7% compared to the average 3% GDP growth in the United States. Clearly, the milieu of the world economy has changed significantly, and over the next 2 decades, the markets that hold the greatest potential for dramatic increase in US export are not the traditional trading partners in Europe, Canada, and Japan, which now account for the overwhelming bulk of the international trade of the United States, but they will be those emerging markets and other developing countries that constitute some 80% of the bottom of the pyramid. The first topic is why global marketing is imperative. There are several drivers, and the first driver is saturation of domestic market. First, and at the most fundamental level, the saturation of domestic markets in the industrialized parts of the world force many companies to look for marketing opportunities beyond their national boundaries. The economic and population growth in developing countries also gave those companies an additional incentive to venture abroad. The second driver is global competition. Something profound has indeed happened in our view of competition around the world. About 30 years ago, the world's greatest automobile manufacturers were General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Today, companies like Toyota, Honda, BMW, Renault, and Hyundai, among others, stand out as competitive nameplates in the global automobile market. Now, with a 15% market share in the United States, Toyota's market share is larger than Ford's 14%. In early 2008, Toyota surpassed General Motors to become the world's largest automaker in terms of worldwide output. Similarly, while personal computers had been almost synonymous with IBM, which had previously dominated the PC business around the world, today the computer market is crowded with Dell and Hewlett-Packard from the US, Sony and Toshiba from Japan, and Samsung from Korea, Acer from Taiwan, and so on. The next driver is global cooperation. Global competition also brings global cooperation. This is most obvious in the information technology industry. For example, IBM and Japan Fujitsu used to be arch rivals. Beginning in 1982, they battled each other for 15 years in such areas such as software copyright. But in 2001, they developed a comprehensive tie-up involving the joint development of software and the mutual use of computer technology. IBM would share its PC server technology with Fujitsu, and the Japanese company would supply routers to IBM. Japan's Sony, Toshiba, and US computer maker IBM are jointly developing advanced semiconductor processing technologies for next-generation chips. As part of the project, IBM transfers its latest technologies to Sony and Toshiba, and the partner companies each send engineers to IBM's research center in New York to work on the joint project. Similarly, in the automobile industry, in 1999, French carmaker Renault took 36% stake in Japanese carmaker Nissan. The two companies then began producing cars on joint platforms in 2005. To help pave the way for that, in 2001, the two car makers decided that they would combine their procurement operations in a joint venture company that would eventually handle 70% of the company's global purchasing. The next driver for global marketing is internet revolutions. Manufacturers that traditionally sell through the retail channel may benefit the most from e-commerce. Most importantly, the data allow for the development of relevant marketing message aimed at important customers and initiate loyal relationship on a global basis. With the onset of satellite communication, consumers in developing countries are equally familiar with global brands as consumers in developed countries. And as a result, there is tremendous pent-up demand for products marketed by multinational companies. And what's more, the internet builds a platform for a two-way dialogue between manufacturers and consumers, allowing consumers to design and order their own products from the manufacturers. Customized build-to-order business model is already an established trend. An examination of the top 100 largest companies in the world, as presented in Exhibit 1, illustrate the profound changes in competitive milieu and provide an image of broad economic trends that we have seen over the past 30 years. Today's environment is characterized not only by much more competition from around the world, but also by more fluid domestic and international market conditions than in the past. As a result, many executives from multinational companies are feeling much more competitive urgency in product development, material procurement, manufacturing, and marketing around the world. For example, like Toyota, while its Japanese home market was the incredibly shrinking market in the 1990s, Toyota's new strategy has been to de-Japanize its business and make the US market its corporate priority. And it's not only this competitive force that is shaping global business today, particularly in the past several years. Many political and economic events have affected the nature of global competition. The demise of the Soviet Union, the establishment of the European Union and the North American Free Trade Agreement, the regulation and privatization of state-owned industries also have changed the market environments around the world. Furthermore, the emerging markets of Eastern Europe and the rapidly re-emerging markets of Southeast Asia also add promise to international business. Furthermore, regarding to e-commerce, e-commerce comes in handy for those smaller firms with international marketing ambitions. The second topic is globalization of markets, convergence and divergence. When a country's per capita income is less than $10,000, Much of the income is spent on food and other necessity items, and very little disposable income remains. However, once per capita income reaches $20,000 or so, the disposable portion of income increases dramatically because the part of the income spent on necessities does not rise nearly as fast as income increase. As a result, a billion people, constituting some 16% of the population around the world with per capita income of $20,000 and beyond or above, have considerably purchasing power. With this level of purchasing power, people, irrespective of their nationality, tend to enjoy similar educational levels, academic and cultural backgrounds, and access to information. As this cultural and social dimension begin to resemble each other in many countries, people's desire for material possessions, way of spending leisure time, and aspiration for the future become increasingly similar. Even the deeply rooted cultures have begun to converge. In other words, from a marketing point of view, those people have begun to share a similar choice set of goods and service originating from many parts of the world. For example, we see young people jogging in Nike shoes, which is an American product made in China, listening to Apple iPod, which is an American product, in many locations around the world, say in Hong Kong, Brazil, Sydney, and Tokyo. The convergence of consumer needs in many parts of the world translate into tremendous business opportunities for companies willing to risk venturing abroad. And also on the other hand, thanks to market globalization, not only have we become more receptive to new things, but we also have a much wider, more divergent choice set of goods and services to choose from to shape our own individual preferences and lifestyle. The divergence of consumer need is taking place at the same time. For example, Latin American fried chicken chain, Polo Campero, which offers crunchy bite of chicken with a Latin style taste, has been catching on quietly in the US, the land of Kentucky Fried Chicken, to cater to Americans' increased appetite for a different kind of chicken. From a marketing point of view, it is becoming more difficult to pinpoint consumer preferences in any local market around the world because the market has become more globalized. First of all, we have to understand the distinction between international trade and international business. International trade consists of export and imports, for example, between the US and the rest of the world. If US imports exceed US export, then US would register a trade deficit. If the opposite were the case, then the US would register a trade surplus. On the other hand, international business is a broader concept and includes international trade and foreign production. US companies typically market their products in three ways. First, they can export their product from the US, which is recorded as a US export. Second, they can invest in their foreign production on their own and manufacture those products abroad for sale there. This transaction does not show up as a US export. And third, they can contract out manufacturing or outsource in whole or part to a company in a foreign country, either by licensing or joint venture agreement. The extensive international penetration of US or other companies has been referred as a global reach. Normally, experienced companies, they tend to manufacture overseas much more than they export. So as just discussed, international trade and foreign production are increasingly managed on a global basis. For example, recently Honda announced that it would start manufacturing its world car in Thailand, Brazil, and China because of the low cost, and then export it mainly to Europe and Japan. In addition to traditional exporting from their home base, these companies manufacture their products in various foreign countries both for local sale and for further exporting to the rest of the world, including their respective home countries. In other words, multinational companies are increasingly managing the international trade flow from within. So this phenomenon is called intra-firm trade. Moving on to our third topic, which is evolution of global marketing. Marketing is essentially the activity, sets of institutions and process for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. Marketing is not only much broader than selling, it also encompasses the entire company's market orientation toward customer satisfaction in a competitive environment. In other words, marketing strategy requires close attention to both customers and competitors. A key point here is that many companies are constantly under competitive pressure to move forward both reactively, which is responding to the changes in the market and competitive environments, and also proactively means that anticipating the upcoming change. There's a saying that if you stand still, you will get run over. Companies generally develop different marketing strategies depending on the degree of experience and the nature of operations in international markets. Companies tend to evolve over time, accumulating international business experience and learning the advantage and disadvantages associated with complexity of manufacturing and marketing around the world. As a result, many researchers have adopted an evolutionary perspective of internationalizations of the company, just like the evolution of the species over time. In this section, we will formally define and explain 5 stages that characterize the evolution of global marketing. The first stage is domestic marketing. Before entering into international markets, many companies focus solely on their domestic market. Their marketing strategy is developed based on information about domestic customer needs and wants, industry trends, economic, technological, and political environments at home. Domestic marketers tend to be ethnocentric and pay little attention to changes taking place in the global marketplace. For example, like changing lifestyles and market segments, emerging competition, and better products that have arrived in their domestic market. As a result, domestic marketers may be vulnerable to the sudden changes forced them by foreign competitions. For example, US automakers suffer from this ethnocentrism in the 1960s and 70s as a result of their neglect of imminent competition from Japanese automakers with their product with more fuel-efficient cars that would eventually seize a market opportunity in the US as a result of the major oil crisis in the 1970s. The second stage is export marketing. Usually, export marketing begins with unsolicited orders from foreign customers. There are 2 types of exporting, which is indirect and direct. Indirect exporting is relying on export management companies or trading companies to handle the company export business. Some companies progress to a more involved stage of internationalization by doing direct exporting. Direct exporting is implemented once 3 internal conditions are satisfied. The first condition is when the management of the company obtains favorable expectation of the attractiveness of exporting based on experience. The second condition is when the company has access to key resource necessary for undertaking additional export-related tasks. For example, like the availability of physical, financial, and managerial resources is closely associated with firm size. Particularly, small companies may have few trained managers and little time for long-term planning as they are preoccupied with day-to-day operational problems. Consequently, they find it difficult to become involved in exporting. The third condition is when management is willing to commit adequate resources to export activities. External pressures also brought companies into export marketing activities. Saturated domestic markets may make it difficult for a company to maintain sales volume in an increasingly competitive domestic market. It will become much more serious when foreign competitors begin marketing products in the domestic market. However, export marketers still tend to take an ethnocentric approach to foreign market as being an extension of their domestic market. An export product developed primarily for home country customer with limited adaptation to foreign customer needs. Once export marketing becomes an integral part of the company's marketing activity, it will begin to seek new direction for growth and expansion. We call this stage international marketing. A unique feature of international marketing is its polycentric orientation with emphasis on product and promotional adaptation in foreign markets whenever necessary. Polycentric orientation here refers to a predisposition of a verb to the existence of significant local culture differences across markets, necessitating the operation in each country being viewed independently. For example, like all strategic decisions are tailored to suit the cultures of the targeted countries. Because of local competitors' proximity, and familiarity with local customer, local competitors, they tend to have an inherent insider advantage over foreign competitors. To strengthen its competitive position, the international marketers could adapt its strategy if necessary to meet the needs and wants of local customer in two alternative ways. First, the company may allocate a certain portion of its manufacturing capacity to its export business. And second, because of transportation costs, tariff and other regulations and availability of human and capital resources in the foreign markets, the company may even begin manufacturing locally. For example, like BMW, who has been exporting their cars to the US for many years. In the 90s, BMW invested in a manufacturing plant in South Carolina in order to be more adaptive to changing customer needs in this important market and to take advantage of inexpensive resource as a result of the dollar depreciations against the euro. A company may establish an independent foreign subsidiary in each and every foreign market and have each of the subsidiary operate independently of each other without any measurable headquarters control. This special case of internal marketing is known as multi-domestic marketing. At multinational marketing stage, the company markets its product in many countries around the world. Management of the company comes to realize the benefit of economies of scale in product development, manufacturing, and marketing by consolidating some of its activity on a regional basis. This regiocentric approach suggests that product planning may be standardized within a region, for example in Western Europe region, but is not standardized across regions. Product may be manufactured regionally as well. Similarly, advertising, promotion, and distribution costs may also be shared by subsidiaries in the region. The next stage is global marketing. So global marketing refers to marketing activities by companies that emphasize three aspects. The first aspect is standardization efforts. It means standardizing marketing programs across different countries, particularly with respect to product offering, promotional mix, price, and channel structures. This effort increases opportunities for the transfer of product, brand, and other ideas across subsidiary and help address the emergence of global customers. The second aspect is coordination across markets. This is reducing cost inefficiency and duplication of efforts among their national and regional subsidiaries. The third aspect is global integration. It means participating in many major world markets to gain competitive leverage and effective integration of the firm's competitive campaign across these markets by being able to subsidize operation in some market with resources generated in others, and responding to competitive attacks in one market by counter-attacking in others. Many researchers agree that global marketing does not necessarily mean standardization of product, promotion, pricing, and distribution worldwide, but rather it is a company's proactive willingness to adopt a global perspective instead of country by country or region by region perspective in developing a marketing strategy. Clearly, not all companies adopt global marketing. It also depends on the characteristic or nature of the product. Yet, an increasing number of companies are proactively trying to find commonalities in their marketing strategy among national subsidiaries. For example, Black& Decker, US manufacturers of hand tools, adopted a global perspective by standardizing and streamlining components such as motors and rotors, while maintaining a wide range of product lines and created a universal image for its product. In this case, it was not standardization of product per se, but rather the company's effort at standardizing key components and product design for manufacturability in the manufacturing industries. This effort is to achieve global leadership in cost and value across common market segments around the world. These figures displaying evolutions of global marketing from domestic marketing to global marketing. And also it is presented their orientation, which is ethnocentric, polycentric, regiocentric, and geocentric, and also product planning and marketing mix decision on each stage. The bottom line regarding to global marketing is global marketing does not necessarily mean that companies should market the same product in the same way around the world uh, because the world markets are converging. To the extent feasible, they probably should. Nonetheless, global marketing is a company willingness to adopt a global perspective instead of country by country or a region by region perspective in developing a marketing strategy for growth and profit. There are also several supplementary reading materials if students wish to have a further reading in the reference book. Consists of comparative advantage theory and international product cycle theory.